And it looks like we are live once again. Welcome back to another episode of the Manny Wolfe Show with my friend, my colleague, my peer, and in some ways an inspiration to me, Jonah J. LANTTO. Jonah, buddy.
My man. Thanks for
having me.
How are you?
Yeah.
Look, in spite of these crazy times, I'm pretty awesome. And I have a lot of empathy for everything that's happened to everybody and what they've lost. But I'm going to come out the other side of this ahead. And that's just me. So I'm living the dream. I got some family time here these last few weeks. I got a lot of shit done at my house and in my yard. And now it's onward and upward.
Let's go right from there then, because I love that, man. I love that. And first of all, I reject the black and white binary notion that if you're positive, it means something bad about the people that are suffering. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's such a bizarre function of social media that people can immediately reduce to this like binary soundbite argument, these hugely complex issues. You know what I mean? A friend of mine, I used to live in a town called Santa Rosa, California, and I have a friend down there named Chris, who is one of the true badasses. You know, there's like, as men, we all learn to posture and we learn how to act tough. Sure. He's one of the guys that you really, really, really don't ever want to be on the wrong side of a disagreement with, right? And
I know a few of those.
Yeah. And it's, you know, they're for every one of those, there are about 100 imposters, right? About 100 that are acting that way. But anyway, I saw him post. I saw him post something. This was a couple of years ago, where he said words to the effect of, "A lot of you guys on social media like to pop off," and how did he put it? He goes, basically, he said, "I don't think any of you would have the balls you have if you were standing face to face with me." And I think that's a really sort of an emblematic sort of, you know, thing about social media, right? It's like we can all just, I don't know what we're doing. It's like we're busting anger nuts or something, you know. It's just like, I don't like the way you don't agree with me. So instead of being in the least bit civil,
Manny, what social media has given a lot of people is what I like to call recreational outrage. It's my old partner, Chris Rubb, and I kind of came up with that. And you see it all the time. It's recreational outrage. And if you can identify it, then you know when you should quickly move on. And even sometimes the best of us get swept up in that. I felt myself in for whatever reason, last week, I was feeling particularly aggressive. Mm-hmm. And I caught myself several times almost getting baited into a senseless Facebook argument, or just willfully wanting to engage in a meme or a post that I philosophically know I disagree with right away. And you got to be able to catch yourself. I don't know what it was, but I was feeling aggressive for whatever reason, and almost fell into that recreational outrage that so many people so easily do.
Yeah,
and like you said, it's a weird world that we live in, when you have to argue with yourself that it's okay to feel good when a lot of other people are feeling bad. It's not selfish to recognize, hey man, this isn't so bad for me, and I get it, and I empathize, and I feel for people, but on an individual level, it's gonna be okay for me. I mean, I lost my house in a flood in 2011. My family, we had just bought, family of 5. We were 1 year into a nearly $200,000 mortgage, and our house was a year later buried under 7 feet of water. I was displaced for 2 years. That to me was a far bigger setback than anything I'm going to experience from COVID right now. I'm still paying for that, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's where I come from too. I feel like my personal brand is not my backstory anymore.
Sure. But when I met you, it was, and it's an amazing backstory.
Yeah. When you met me, it totally was.
For anyone listening to this who hasn't heard a really killer interview with Manny and gotten a little flashback into his life, check out his when I interviewed him back on the Good Talk. It was a really fantastic conversation, and dude has been through some stuff.
Yeah, and I think that is part of what positions me for this. You know, I don't know, man. I mean, I was told yesterday my privilege was showing, and I said, "Oh, that's not my privilege." I did put one foot into the waters yesterday with someone, and it's like you said, I just felt a little saucy and aggressive, but I don't identify with that anymore. But I also know that like I've been through stuff that is so hard, just so damn hard, and I love, what did you call it, recreational outrage?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that that's a real and true and legitimate phenomenon. And I think that by and large, it indicates that your life doesn't have any real challenges in it. If you've got the ability, right? If you've got the luxury of sitting around looking for people to be pissed at on social media, that means you're probably not up to your armpits in alligators.
No. We are extremely privileged in the United States. A lot of people would argue we've become a relatively soft culture. There's probably some truth to that. I don't know. It's this weird thing when I go through the cycle with people who say, well, kids were tougher back in the day and I didn't have to wear a helmet and we played outside more. And it's just, you know, every generation could say that about the generation before them. Well, you just, you know, you've got it so easy these days. And I find it to be a little bit useless to say that. You know, that how does that inherently help you today to recognize that, or to say that about somebody, or just to you know, not condone what the modern society is doing because it wasn't what was happening in your time?
Yeah. I especially love the bit about the helmet, because that's just such a classic, right? Yeah, and you know, I lived.
Hey, cars didn't have seatbelts in the 50s. Great, you know,
or the 60s or 70s.
Right, there was a lot more human. There were a lot more human projectiles back then. I mean, but people were tougher.
That's the thing that we should take away from this. People were tougher. So where did I want? You've just given me so much here. Where did I want to go with that? I lived geographically in a very, very strange place, because I literally did have to walk uphill to school and then uphill back. It was like an Escher painting. Yeah. And so I'm just so sick of these soft, entitled kids today. No, I'm just kidding, man. I think that it's a form of masturbation to even engage in that whole, like, oh, my generation was so much tougher than yours. And it's so funny to me that
let me guess, your dad can beat up my dad, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny now that the millennials will actually be saying that to the generation after them. You know, I'm fascinated. You know what? Let's talk a little bit about millennials and maybe some of the bizarre sort of typecasting they get. Because I'll say this, sure, millennials may come across as entitled and all of these things, but I distinctly remember raising my kid to feel that he had a right to ask questions. So in a way, isn't it our chickens coming home to roost?
It is indeed, but I'm technically fall into the millennial class.
Oh, okay.
Just on the outside of it. I'll be 39 tomorrow. I think last I checked, they extend millennials all the way up to 85. And it's bizarre to me, because the people I graduated with, the men and women in my circle of friends, and even deeper into that acquaintance level, these people are out there kicking ass. They have amazing careers. They have, I feel, a really strong understanding of empathy and of the cultural environment, and maybe some forward thinking. A lot of them are business owners, small business owners. They're solopreneurs. Many of them have achieved what I would call economic freedom. Even if you're not getting rich, if you're getting by and paying your bills on dollars that you earned, not from a paycheck that somebody else is writing for you. That's economic freedom. And okay, if there's entitlement that comes with that, then so be it. I'll take the fucking entitlement, because the economic freedom feels pretty goddamn good.
That's the sound of it being hit out of the park, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what I wanted to say. I think that there's a form of entitlement that people of my generation have where they think they can call your different mindset entitlement.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like when I was young, I did not know any 20-something millionaires that were impacting hundreds of thousands of people. Okay? Like now I do. Right? Like,
for better or worse, right? For better or worse.
These are for better. I mean, that's a good point, but I'm specifically talking about for better. I'm talking about I'll just name a few people I can think of offhand. There's a kid named Arnie Gisk who started millennial entrepreneur community, 80,000 person Facebook group, was a digital nomad for 2 or 3 years, probably does really great financially. I don't know if it's kind of tacky to go ahead and drop other people's figures, but like, so, and then when I talk to him, he's very, very confident about his abilities that he has learned.
Sure.
So as a guy who's like 50 something, I could see, although I don't agree with it, how another 50 something might go, oh, that cocky little punk. But you know what? This guy started with nothing.
I bet that little shit can't even change the oil on his car.
Right. Exactly.
Oh,
here's what he can do. He can pay someone to change the oil on his car every time it needs it.
Right.
The two mentors whose mastermind I'm in, a guy named Mark Lack and a guy named Peter Vu. I'll gladly single those guys out. Both of them have made millions. Neither one is 30 yet. And both of them are impacting positively at least thousands of people, if not tens of thousands of people. I mean, that's significant. And both of these guys have visions. They're not even 30 yet, and their vision is already about legacy work. So maybe it's not so much that your generation is, lazy, entitled, spoiled. Maybe it's more, there's a sort of a pressure that each generation creates in what I would call the collective consciousness. And the next generation starts at a higher baseline. And I believe that's what I'm seeing. If I'm being honest with you, like, sure. You're a great example. When I was in my 20s, I knew of one guy who had a pirate radio station, which was ridiculous.
Yeah, super cool. Like, wow, that guy's a legend at that point. Seriously. Yeah. Guy was a legend.
Yeah. And now, so I'll give a little reveal here. Me and a couple of my sort of, I'll call them my star coaching students. We formed a partnership to roll out a private school. And in this private school, I'm thinking about curriculum like, let's have kids start a podcast. Let's have kids launch an online business. Let's have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
These things. And the reason that I'm thinking like that is because we need to try to be prepared for what these kids are going to find normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's preparing them for jobs that don't exist yet.
Yeah.
And they're coming as technology evolves. Yeah. What is it? I forget. Is it Murphy's Law that says that technology is going to unequivocally evolve faster than we can keep up with it? I may have the law wrong, but something like that. I think Kurt Weill said it. I believe
that sounds Murphy-ish. Yeah. Well, so there's Moore's Law.
Moore's Law. That's the one.
Yeah, and that's. It's interesting you brought that up, man, because Moore's Law is in the DNA of the school we're building.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole thing is we've got to be unapologetically forward-facing, forward-looking, mm-hmm. Right? We've got to empower kids to create their own.
So you agree with Space Force then?
I don't know much about Space Force, but let's go there for fun.
I mean, if we're endorsing preparing people for jobs that don't exist yet, then we have to give 45 a little credit for Space Force. I don't know that we might need them someday.
So Space Force is like
it's the new branch of the armed forces, my friend. It's official. It's real. It's not a joke. I'm not talking about the Steve Carell Netflix show coming out Friday, which looks outstanding, by the way. And I will binge the fuck out of that probably this weekend. No.
Yes, Force. I do. I do believe in Space Force then. I didn't know what it was until now, but this is great. See, because Are we going to become interplanetary? Barring what you might call an act of God, absolutely. Right?
Eventually.
Yeah.
It seems inevitable if we don't blow ourselves up first.
Right. Exactly.
Seriously, if we don't discover some new technology that utterly destroys us,
Right.
worse than the current ones are already destroying us, then yeah, sure, we'll get interplanetary someday. I buy into that, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, it was the fevered dream of a madman until Elon Musk came along.
Exactly.
And now it's the fevered dream of a certifiable genius who seems unstoppable.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So yeah, Space Force, but more than that, what I think, instead of complaining that millennials and the generations they're going to produce as offspring are this or that, I think where we need to be focusing our energy is, if I'm going to be in retirement and old age, when your kids are sort of starting to come up and run shit, what's the best thing I can do to prepare them?
It's a damn good question.
Right? And
keep them away from infotainment channels. Number one. Keep them away from the 24/7 infotainment channels that are destroying people's minds.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there for sure. But so that's kind of the philosophy, right? Is like, if we look at Moore's law, which states that technology will double in speed and power every 2 years.
There it is.
Then we can say we don't have any effing idea what 20 years from now will look like.
None.
We can't. Even if there were no like arbitrary market forces that steered how the technology was developed, right? Because I remember in my lifetime, and I believe it was Ray Kurzweil at this time, if it wasn't him, it was one of the futurists, the great futurists, said about 25 years ago that speech to text would never exist. It was just too big a problem. It was too tough a nut to solve. And now we got it in $200 phones.
Yeah, it's funny to me when I consider some of the greatest, we'll call even fiction authors of our time, the people who created Star Trek and Star Wars.
Right.
They didn't think of a Google and on all the great, amazing, incredible things. I mean, they were relocating people on a molecular level with teleportation, but they basically still needed to radio into a guy at a library to get information. You know, they didn't have.
That's so good.
So even our best minds who are coming up with the fiction of our potential futures didn't think of Google and everything that we have in our pockets now with a cell phone.
That's right. And the truth is that our best minds haven't been born yet.
No.
You know, they haven't been born yet. And again, that goes back to that, I think, to that the way each generation creates an updraft on the collective consciousness and raises the baseline for the next generation. Right.
I hope that's happening. It's a beautiful thought.
It's absolutely happening.
But there's so much of the same terrible shit happening today that has plagued our culture for so many years. And and can we with actual evidence back up that it's not happening? I look at the tragic situation that just occurred within the last 24 hours with the poor black dude in Minneapolis who was just murdered by a cop with a knee on his throat. And that type of stuff has been happening in our culture for decades, and it only seems to be getting worse. When I grew up watching the Rodney King riots, and even as a child seeing that, holy crap, this is messed up, man. I would have thought there's no way that type of shit is still happening when I'm an adult, especially when people can record it. And now we just record it, and it's you want to talk about the new normal? Well, that's the fucking new normal. You would have thought that when we can record murder happening before our very eyes, regardless of who's initiating those murders, you would have thought we could put a stop to it with all of that. But we haven't. And that's one example of many that I feel haven't changed. They've just been swept under the rug, or they've been given a new mask. You know, we went from slavery to mass incarceration, and it's just a new mask goes over an old problem.
I think that's absolutely a prevalent thread in society. Are you familiar with the work of Steven Pinker?
I'm not.
So Steven Pinker, among other things, Well, what's relevant for us here is, and you guys, you can all check out his TED Talk, you guys. Let me just actually throw that in the comments.
Sure. And that's one of the examples. I would look at the drug war as another example, as a disastrous effect on our culture. If you would have told me when I was 16, the first massive research paper I ever did in my life was on what I felt was the unjustifiable scheduling of marijuana. I felt marijuana should be legal even as a teenager. Now, of course, it is in a handful of states, not at the federal level. But if you would have told me when I was 16 that, hey, Jonah, wait, you're going to be 39, it's still not going to be federally legal, I mean, like, you're fucking crazy. No way. People are going to get it. If I get it, I'm a kid, I get it.
Yeah.
You tell me it won't be, and then you know, as you get older, you understand how that system works and why it is that way, and who it is benefiting, and where the money goes, and what they're using it for, and and I hate to say they are, what the government is using it for, because this isn't a they. I try to avoid using that ominous, like, oh man, they're just out to get you. They're out. I do, because in this case, it really just is the federal government. It's the DEA, and it's a control system. There's money attached to incarceration, and I mean, I've traveled down that path on several other shows and stuff, and I'm assuming plenty of people are familiar with that. I don't want to go too far down that, but there's all these examples of, again, these different aspects of our culture wearing a new mask, and they're the same problems that aren't getting that much better. I mean, there are headlines with articles that are almost the same word for word, but they're happening 40 years apart to different people.
Yeah. So those things are true, and it can be like sort of going down a morbid rabbit hole. So what I would suggest for anyone who wants a different perspective that's very powerful and very, very researched is to check out The Myth of Violence, the TED Talk by Steven Pinker. And to my mind, we're not perfect. We have not sort of evolved into a utopian society, but every measurable measure of quality of life
is higher.
Is higher.
Violent crime is down. We're living longer, at least in the United States, in spite of a shrinking middle class. There are fewer people in poverty. Our healthcare still sucks, but less people are dying of disease. There are measurables. There really are.
There really are, and that's what you'll see in that talk. And plus, for a guy like you should know who Steven Pinker is, because
I'm interested.
He's kind of a giant. You'll like him.
Okay.
So let's get into your take on not coronavirus, but our responses to it.
Man, it's a weird one. I respect everybody's choice to do what they will. I will ultimately. I trust science and preparation and prevention more than I trust reaction. And I have too many scientists and doctors who I call friend, that I respect and admire, who informed me. Is what we've done perfect? No, but hey, we're leading the country in COVID deaths, and no, I don't believe that. For not for a second that we lead the world in COVID related deaths because we are misusing COVID as lying about people that have died. Has there been pressure? Yes, fact check for sure. Hospitals are getting more money because people died from COVID there, and so they're incentivized, perhaps incentivized, I'm using air quotes, to place a COVID label on that individual. But if they were there because of the COVID, and that hospital is having more pressure because of the COVID, and they do have more patients and so on and so forth, well, then they need more money. They are the ones who need more money. So I respect people's position who want to stay safe from this virus. I don't view this as a massive form of control. I find the Bill Gates 5G conspiracy to be utterly nonsensical.
Yeah.
And should you wear a mask? Yeah. Do I wear a mask? No. I live in North Central North Dakota in Ward County. You call me selfish, call me naive, call me what you will, but it's different here. It's way different where I'm at than if I'm in New York or Atlanta or Seattle. And so how I am approaching the situation should not be how somebody in Los Angeles County or some other population center is approaching the situation. When my family, we sheltered in place for over a month, didn't leave our house. We had food brought to us, did everything that we felt was proper to be safe. Our governor here in North Dakota, Doug Burgum, has done an outstanding job managing it within our state and using a data-driven approach.
Yeah,
and that's what I appreciate. So from the top down, I think our country was maybe a little slow to respond in some regards, and I think there's a lot of confusion in certain leadership positions within our country. I don't want to make that a direct attack. Also, studies have shown that many populist or sort of conservative driven countries have fared the worst on a global scale in terms of their approach to the COVID. Places like Russia, the United States, Brazil are a few examples. So that in a very large package are, I guess, some of my thoughts in how our country has handled this. Final thought. The great, again, air quotes, the greatest economy in the world should not be brought to its knees because people couldn't work for 6 fucking weeks. We're told by big business people and billionaires and know-it-alls on Wall Street that everybody should have 3 months of savings in their bill. That everyone should have 3 months of savings to pay their bills. You should have 3 months stocked up. These bitches didn't. You got literally, you have cruise lines that posted a decade straight of profits. Decades straight of profits, and you motherfuckers can't handle 2-3 months with nobody buying tickets. That's a bigger fucking problem here. Yeah, that's just one example of many. I feel for the small businesses, but for large, big businesses, and just for the country as a whole, you tell me you can't handle that. And then in our country, we're the only country in which people have to fear medical bankruptcy if they get a disease. And to me, another massive failure, and I won't blame that at the feet of this administration. That's our government as a whole.
That's institutionalized at this point, right?
Absolutely.
So you bring up a lot of sort of blood close to the skin points in this. What I'm most curious about is what I've just seen from you. I would call reasoned, impassioned, thoughtful, and opinionated. And here's the thing. Those things are not just good. Those things are essential. So I guess my question I'd like to get your insight on is, why can't we do that as a community? Why can't we do that as a population? On something so important? Why is it that if I don't believe that I need to wear a mask, that I'm conflated with somebody who wants to kill people and wants to see people die? And that's just one example, but I'm sure that you take my point, right?
Absolutely. I completely take your point.
Where did the nuance and the subtlety in the discussion go?
Out the fucking window, because you're listening to a tweeting madman, or you're getting sucked into some conspiracy hole, or you're watching too much infotainment, and that's the whole breadth and scale of it. I think it's because everybody wants to be right, and my right is more right than your right.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense. There's a lot there, but I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to be presented with new information and have my mindset altered in terms of I'm willing to adjust my mindset
to accommodate facts.
To accommodate facts and new information. And unfortunately, on a neurological scale, our minds are designed to oftentimes resist information that does not fit in line with our ideology. And that's not a conspiracy theory. They've studied this on a neurological level. Your mind perceives that information as a threat. You have to willfully be able to change that. How did I get there? I don't know. A lot of self-reflection, enough LSD that I got awakened at some point in my life from experiencing these sacred psychedelic journeys, whatever the case may be. I mean, a lot of guys like Rogan would say, hey, everybody do a heroic dose of mushrooms. This world would be a better place. Sometimes I'm inclined to agree. Do I think mushrooms are for everybody? No, but we are on the verge of a psychedelic renaissance in medicine, and people will be able to study these medicines again. And we are seeing how it changes the negative points in our life and how it heals the traumatic things that we've had happen to our brain. That's how I got there. I'm not saying it works for everybody.
Well, that's how I got there too, I think, or at least a big part of it.
Right.
I would say this. I don't know that mushrooms are for everybody, but I think everybody should take mushrooms.
Right.
A heroic dose.
Absolutely.
I look back at that time in my life, and it was funny. One of my best friends quoted, I'm going to quote him here. He said, "Psychedelics are the only drug that quits you when it's good and ready." Everything else you have to, you get an addiction, you fight it, you kick it, you quit it. Psychedelics are like, yo, man, I'm done with you.
Right.
But before they were done with me, we had me and the same tight knit group of friends had probably about a 3-year period where it was heroic doses every weekend, literally without fail. We didn't miss a weekend for about 3.5 years. And it was a profound, it was so profound a transformation in the way I related to my own thoughts and to the world that I'm still discovering all these years later. This happened when I was in my late teens. All these years later, I'm still seeing ways that it actually had huge positive effects on me.
Of course it did.
Yeah.
And people fear those because we are operating mainly with our ego as the pilot in our mind.
Yeah.
If you've got a couple pilots in your mind, the ego is the one that is the strongest. He's the toughest, or she is the toughest. They have the most control, and they drive like a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
I mean,
road raging all over the place.
And so to be able to experience life in the absence of ego is very terrifying. It's very fearful. Sometimes when people take their first hit of cannabis or first couple hits of cannabis, they might get a slight feeling of that, right? You really get it through psychedelic exploration.
Yeah.
But people oftentimes they just don't want that. It is way too scary to have to internalize and be faced with your own thoughts and feelings or these discomforts that you have.
Yeah. I think that probably contributes to more of what we would call bad trips than unexpected hallucinations do.
Sure.
Although I do remember that same friend I just quoted, he brought his girlfriend at the time with us on one of our trips, and she went around the bend just because she was seeing visual hallucinations.
Sure.
And we're trying to go, no, we get it. Yeah, no, it's melting. I know.
It's cool.
I'm not tricking you. This is awesome.
And I would contest there are no bad trips, only some that are really difficult that perhaps you should not have gone on.
Yeah, no, I like that. I would agree with that.
It is. There are no bad trips. Some are just really fucking difficult. And that's usually because you probably didn't prepare for it. There's a reason it's called a trip. It takes preparation.
Ah, nice, man. That does sound sagey.
and I learned that, right? I would not have had that wisdom 18 years ago. It was just, hey, this is fun and cool. But then you get to that backside where the work gets done, where things really get internalized.
Yeah.
And it helps. Look, it just helps. And the work being done in our country right now, again, we're starting to see it. for people listening, just know if this is your first time hearing about psychedelic research as related to medicine for the mind, you can check it out. There's a ton of articles to support what they've done. I'm not talking about some crackpot scientists just feeding people LSD in a fucking dorm room. Legitimate neurological research being conducted with guidelines, with cameras, with people who have volunteered and are not being tricked into this. And it's pretty amazing work. And I really look forward to seeing the benefits for humanity, for the benefits for understanding psychedelic medicine, and for the healing of people's minds that we're going to see this decade thanks to psychedelic research.
Nice.
In conjunction with neuroscience.
So let's see, where do we want to go from here, Jonah?
Right.
so many things opened up.
Where's the landing point there?
Yeah, right. I want to find out a little bit about your approach that allowed you to, in a 3-year time frame, go from starting, basically another basement podcast to where are you at now?
So I'm in a studio in the city in which I live. It's a shared office space, which makes it affordable, which is why I can have a studio. But it's pretty nice. I got a big, awesome space here. But it 3 years to the very day that I started a podcast, creating a basement studio with my friend Chris Rubb. It was I think it was Saturday, November 17th. 3 years to the very day, I went on and I produced a late night talk show with a sold out live audience in my hometown, filmed in front of that live studio audience, and then syndicated on the internet as well as our regional cable access channel. Super proud of that achievement. It was and really, how did I get there? By remaining open to ideas, networking, meeting people, and saying yes more than I say no. And that's really all what got me there. Doing a late night talk show was not my idea, but it was someone else's, and they brought it to me because they felt I could operationalize their idea, and I did. So I became executive producer of it's Goodnight Minot. We before COVID took over, we produced 3 sold out late night shows. In Minot, where I live, we were undeniably the talk of the town. It was hard as shit to get tickets. People loved it. Roaring crowds, great social hour, red carpet experience. I mean, really everything that you get with a late night talk show, we delivered on a regional hometown level. Our comedy was centered around the beads within our state that people are familiar with. We came up with some amazing desk bits and some of our own ideas. And it popped, and we look forward to getting back to it.
That's awesome, man. In terms of your audience growth and raising awareness, you gave some generalizations about staying open, saying yes more than you say no, and things like that. Anything on a more tactical, practical level that you think has really helped you?
Certainly. We roughly... So I started the podcast in November of 2016. In April of 2017, I was having coffee in a coffee shop with my friend Justin Martin. He's a tattoo artist. We were talking about some cool ideas for some podcasts and some shows. A man by the name of Josh Wolski would come into my life and really forever change my life. He's a regional journalist, went on to become a city councilman and everything like that. He had overheard my conversation, small coffee shop. You can't miss, you hear what's going on. And he just hit me up with a message. He said, "Hey man, I heard you talking about your podcast. I checked it out. I love it that you love the Big Lebowski. I'm a big fan too. I've got a cool idea for you. Do you want to have a beer or a coffee?" I said, I'll take. I said, number 1, I love ideas. Number 2, let's have a beer. Yeah. And I literally met Josh the next day, and he pitched me on the idea. He said, what are your thoughts on doing a locally focused podcast? I was like, yeah, man, it's what. Who do you have access to? I said, yes, I'm interested. I don't know that I know enough local people who are doing things that quote unquote matter, that creates a conversation. So Josh and I joined forces, and he just had access to or just knew a completely different social group than who I knew. It opened a lot of doors. We started Good Talk Minot underneath the Good Talk Network banner. That's why it's the Good Talk Network is my brand. The idea was always there would be these subsidiary shows that we could produce so that if somebody else wanted their own podcast or wanted their own show, I would willingly assist in helping to produce that. And in the case of Good Talk Minot, we began that show and it really allowed us to shine a light on a lot of great local people from nonprofit executive directors. We really became a champion voice in our community for the nonprofit sector and helping to get their word out there and really what it is they do and some of the challenges they face, and as well as a lot of just local people of influence. I mean, it was so bizarre, Manny, when I've got the president of our local university, I've got the mayor, I've got sheriffs walking into my house, past my yipping ass dogs, downstairs, into my basement, past my goddamn laundry, and into my basement studio. You know, I've got people who spend a lot of time in what you might call important rooms, walking into my basement to be on my show. It was fucking nuts, man.
That's so cool.
And so building the local recognition was one of the most key moves that I made, and really it wouldn't have been possible without Mr. Josh Walsky. So shout out to you, Josh. If you ever get a chance to hear this, or you're out there listening, love you, man. Thank you.
I love that. So whether it was strategy or happenstance, your approach became really to lock in your local territory.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. I don't know that anyone else is thinking like that, or not that I'm aware of anyway. Right?
Manny, they probably are. I haven't heard of them, but it is what has made me a star in my area, and I say that very humble. I'm very honored to be where I am. It's been tough this year, especially, man, with the sold out late night shows and the Good Talk. The Good Talk rocket ship was about to blast off, and COVID slowed that down. And I could be pissing and moaning about it, and I could be mopey. I mean, I lost thousands and thousands of dollars in business by not being able to do live shows. We had commercial shoots set up through the studio. I mean, I lost plenty. There was plenty on the table for me. But it's you persevere, you move on, but it really was pioneering on a local level, this show and in this region, and becoming synonymous with podcasting in this territory is my name.
I just think that's a really cool twist, and I'm pretty sure it's a twist. You know, like you, I know a lot of podcasters.
Sure.
Right. And the idea of podcasting is for almost everyone, global audience.
Absolutely.
So are you guys opening back up out there?
Yeah, North Dakota is getting pretty well open. We have some North Dakota Start Smart guidelines, and there's some different things happening. But it looks like we'll get back to some live events starting in July and later into the year. So yeah, we're really the really tough area in North Dakota is our population center, which is the city of Fargo. That's more than 4 hours away from where we live, up in north central North Dakota, in the city of Minot.
Okay. Speaking of that, I have a friend who's very plugged into the nonprofit world in Fargo. I think an introduction needs to be made.
Don't tell me it's Patrick Kirby.
Oh, I won't tell you, but it is Patrick.
Is it really?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
Patrick is my guy.
No shit.
No shit. Patrick is my
what
guy.
a weird small. He's been on the show.
Oh, good. Well,
Patrick has been a guest on the Good Talk.
As he should be.
Yeah,
he should be.
He's pretty close with another longtime supporter of the Good Talk Network, Mr. Scott Burlingame. Scott Burlingame is the executive director of Independence Inc. They do a lot for folks with disabilities, and so that's how I came to meet Patrick. Yeah, it's cool.
I feel like
that's some real small world shit.
Yeah, that really is. You and me are name dropping like hip hop stars in the 90s right now. I like it. So do you have a strategy and a plan moving forward to take it bigger than your region? Because you've done some things here that I think a lot of people in the podcasting space would really aspire to. Right? It's and you're the guy doing it, so you're in it day in and day out. And I get a sense that on some level, it's not a small deal. But from an outside perspective, I'll tell you, what you created is not a small deal, right? It's a big deal. You've done a big thing.
Thanks, man.
You took something from nothing, man. You know,
you're giving me goosebumps, Manny. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
I'm very
good,
humbled and honored by that compliment.
Good. So any idea for moving forward how to make it bigger, or do you just saturate and just become in the DNA of your local environment, or like what's the dream?
There certainly is a vision, and before we moved out of the basement, I got together a group of really intelligent people, just people, most of them with far more knowledge, bigger brain than I have, and we did a really massive whiteboard session. I think there was about a half a dozen of us, and if we said what would the end game goal be of the Good Talk Network, and we worked our way backward from there. So the end game goal, the dream goal would be if we had a 24-hour studio that was producing content, not like 24/7 infotainment, but I mean, I've gone on just not only with the podcast, but we've produced a lot of sketch comedy and a lot of skits that have had some pretty great success. And then now we've got the local, we've got the regional talk show. I produce a few other podcasts, Ed Heads and After the First Glass. Of course, the Ed Heads co-host will be with Manny on Friday. Look out for them, Dr. Dan Kahn and Chelsea Holtz. They do a show on the Good Talk called the Ed Heads. They're fabulous people. But the dream was if we had a double studio and we're consistently producing very regular content, because right now it's hard, and a lot of people you're bending time and you're working on a very low budget with all of this just to try to make it happen. So that was the goal, and we just step by step worked it all the way back, literally to the basement where I'm the one-man show doing the job of like 4 people at once. At that point in time, like I was running the sound, I was running the show as host, I was running the camera, I'm doing the producing, and that's what we did, and step by step. And so it was maybe 6 months or so after that session that we opened the doors to the Good Talk studio, and it was about Good Talk Studio opened in April. So what's that? April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So about 7-8 months after we opened the doors to the studio, we produced our first live show and sold that out. And really the vision is to produce great content that matters to people, remain open to ideas, and hopefully we'd love to take right now all talk shows. People think East Coast, West Coast. What's the talk show of the Midwest, Manny?
That's true.
What is it?
There
isn't one.
It's got to be the Good Talk Network.
Right. There isn't one. So that's the end game. We want the Good Talk brand and Good Night Live, which is our late night show. We want to be known as the Midwest talk show.
Love it.
That's the end game. And you know what? If we don't get all the way there, we're going to get pretty fucking far, and it's going to be awesome. Yeah.
I wish you the best of luck with that, man. I think that I think it's just a simple matter of, keeping pushing it out just a little bit at a time. I mean, what you've done in 3 years is pretty significant. So thank you so much, Jonah. I knew it would be great to catch up with you. You did not disappoint, not in the slightest. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Pretty simple. Facebook.com/The Good Talk Network. You can also find our podcast wherever podcasts can be found. Again, The Good Talk Network, Jonah LANTTO. And I know we discussed a little bit that I speak with a lot of local people. That doesn't mean the conversations we have are not nationally relevant. It just depends on the guest. People often say, well, what's your podcast about? And it's about the guest. It depends on what the guest is bringing to the table. So it could be anything from psychedelics to addiction to racism to education, or just a very successful business story about an entrepreneur who found their way.
Love it, man.
Appreciate you, Manny. Great show. I loved being on. It's too rare that I'm sitting on this side of the podcast. Ask the questions, so it's a cool relief. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man. It was great to have you. You and I will be in contact more, but for now we got to sign off.
Later.
Later.